Philip Dunne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like first of all to thank the Chair and members of the Backbench Business Committee for granting the opportunity to make this statement 3 sitting days before the Chancellor of the Exchequer rises to make his own statement to the House on his 2021 budget. I'm also grateful to the Exchequer Secretary for alerting me to the reason why she isn't present on the Treasury bench for this statement, and I know she is watching for proceedings virtually, and I'm grateful to her for her message earlier. I'd also briefly like to thank my colleagues on the Environmental Audit Committee, both past and present, who've been involved in this inquiry, which led to the report which I introduce today. From very early on in our work last year, it became abundantly clear that the government, in creating policies to revive the economy after the devastating impact of the COVID pandemic, must take every opportunity to grow back greener, the name of our report. We have this year a golden opportunity to do so, with the Prime Minister genuinely committed to giving global leadership to this issue this year, as he will be hosting the G7 in Cornwall in 4 months' time, and the largest international conference ever hosted in this country under the auspices of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in Glasgow in 9 months' time. In November last year, the government intensified its ambition to meet its targets and obligations under the UN Convention and the Paris Agreement by increasing its commitments in publishing the nationally determined contribution for the UK, setting an example to the other countries who will be coming to the UK this year by confirming a 68% targeted reduction in 1990 level emissions by 2030, a key milestone on the path to net zero Britain by 2050. And when the world congregates here, whether physically or virtually, for COP26, we want the UK to have a demonstrably powerful case of action, not just words, to inspire the rest of the world about how a major industrialized economy can meet the challenge of climate adaptation. It's therefore particularly critical that we do not miss the other clear opportunity which presents itself as the Chancellor decides next week which further exceptional fiscal and monetary levers to pull to revive the economy from its greatest contraction in over 3 centuries. I can put it no more simply than this, Madam Deputy Speaker. We must not repeat the mistakes of the past as we start to recover from COVID. We must ensure that the measures we take will also materially help the goal of net zero Britain. Now, we have much to commend in how the government has gone about the recovery to date. The Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution is a vital step towards the government's twin objectives of economic recovery and climate change adaptation. Similarly, the Chancellor's National Infrastructure Strategy was accompanied by a revision of Green Book guidance so that investment decisions properly account for overarching government net zero policy objectives. These high-level strategies are now being backed up by further key staging posts, such as the Energy White Paper. But the pause in progress of delivering government policy caused by the COVID crisis over the past 12 months now must be overcome, as the detailed plans and policies so vital to delivering on these objectives must now be brought forward and implemented at pace and scale. Our committee keeps receiving confirmation that the private sector is standing by with a wall of money to invest in projects which make a genuine contribution to the economic recovery and to net zero. They need the demand signals and policy structures in place from government to do so. One policy for recovery, which was brought out as an eye-catching measure when first announced as part of the summer economic package last year, which we applauded as showing a strong and positive direction of travel, is now, I regret to say, threatening to catch the eye for all the wrong reasons. Madam Deputy Speaker, unless it is urgently overhauled, the Green Homes Grant, with its ambitious target of retrofitting energy efficiency measures for up to 600,000 homes, risks giving this vital government support a bad name. Installers are quoting for work, but instead of taking on more staff and investing in training them to generate the green jobs of the future, they are actually having to lay off staff because homeowners are experiencing such unacceptable delays in having their planned work approved or voucher approvals paid. In many areas of the country, there are many homeowners who want to take up the government's offer of help with energy efficiency measures, but cannot find accredited installers willing to quote. Even though funding for this scheme was extended until March 2022, which is welcome, it still seems mired in administrative delay, and now we read press reports that it might be ended entirely. This would be a grave error. There are 19 million homes which need energy efficiency measures to help reduce the 17% of carbon emissions emanating from our homes. This has to be tackled with support from government. The scheme needs to be overhauled and extended, not scrapped. The Chancellor in his budget next week will be the first who has absolute freedom to propose changes to the rates of value-added tax or to remove certain goods and services from VAT altogether following Brexit. What better opportunity is there to use this new flexibility than to reduce rates of VAT on repair services and reused or recycled materials, and to encourage low carbon technologies and energy efficiency improvements to our homes by cutting the VAT payable on green home upgrades? My honourable and right honourable friends in the Treasury and their officials will shake their heads and tell me that any revenue foregone from such measures will have to be found from somewhere else. Well, quite, and increases in taxation are bound to be less popular than reductions. But what a powerful means of addressing our throwaway culture and to demonstrate that the government genuinely backs repair, reuse and recycling of goods. Isn't it the case, Madam Deputy Speaker, that such an investment in a circular economy would pay massive dividends in the long run? Lastly, in relation to our report, I'd like to highlight our recommendations on the Bank of England's response to the economic crisis. I would start by thanking the Governor of the Bank and his officials for the constructive approach they've taken to our work, and by recognising the Bank's excellent record in highlighting the financial risks from climate change above all other central banks. It was the first central bank to publish its own climate-related financial disclosure. The Bank did, however, we regard, miss a trick when introducing its financial support package for firms, making a material contribution to the UK economy last year. In our view, the bank's purchase of commercial paper in these corporate businesses ought to have required more stringent sustainability conditions, as happened in other countries, and in particular, the publication of climate-related financial disclosures should have been a requirement in line with the government's green finance strategy. The Governor of the Bank of England has quite rightly sought a little more clarity from the government in the mandate it sets for the Monetary Policy Committee in its conduct of the UK monetary policy. Our committee has recommended that the Chancellor should make explicit that the Monetary Policy Committee should have regard to the government's climate objectives, which it already does, but also its nature objectives in its work. This simple single step would also assist the bank in adjusting its corporate bond purchasing policy to support these objectives better in future, to lead the way in reducing carbon intensity of the UK corporate sector overall. Madam Deputy Speaker, our present challenges in the midst of this pandemic are being addressed by the ingenuity of scientists, the skill of the vaccine task force, and the heroic efforts of the NHS and all their volunteers in organising the vaccine rollout at such pace. But I'm sorry to say, and it will come as no surprise to the House, that there is no vaccine which is proof against runaway climate change. It is a challenge which requires all our effort and ingenuity and changes in behaviour to address. The government, in its response to the crisis, has shown encouraging signs of promoting a green recovery. Our report points out that there is much more to be done to sustain the recovery in a way which sees the UK being set genuinely on a track to net zero. I commend this report to the House.
I call Barry Gardner, who is coming to us by video link, to ask the first question.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Chair of the Committee, not only for the way he's presented the report this morning, but also for the way in which he chairs the committee with such patience and tact and often good humour. COVID has caused unprecedented hardship, physical, mental and economic. The government's own figures suggest an 11% contraction of our economy this year and a loss of 1.5 million jobs from the high street. And this comes just as the economy is embarking on that profound transition away from transport and heating infrastructures based on fossil fuels, which will see even more jobs lost in those old industries, with unemployment forecast to rise to 2.6 million this year. The report is clear that retrofitting and upgrading the 29 million UK homes is not only essential to meet our 68% emission reductions target by 2030, but is a huge creator of new jobs. Does the Chairman agree then that government should bring forward much greater investment in energy efficiency programmes and resolve the serious delivery problems around the Green Homes grant?
Dunne.
To my honourable friend, who's a valiant supporter on the committee, and I'm grateful for his comments about our report and the way the committee operates. He's absolutely right. This measure, when introduced last year, was a really positive signal that the government was going to deploy part of its manifesto commitment of over £9 billion to invest in buildings energy efficiency improvements, that some of this, £1.5 billion, was to go towards owner-occupiers and the private rented sector, whereas the rest is likely to go into social housing and other types of public buildings. But the scheme has been suffering from very low take-up because of the extraordinary administrative burden that was imposed on accessing the scheme, the lack of qualified tradesmen to undertake the work because they have to go through a particular certification process that few companies have been prepared to secure, and also the challenge of the duration of the scheme. It is very difficult to persuade contractors to take on staff to do the work, or even frankly to quote for the work, as I was saying in my remarks, if the scheme is going to come to an end in a short period. So it was initially a 6-month scheme, thankfully extended to an 18-month scheme, which now runs out in only 13 months from now. But that's not enough. We think this scheme should endure for the whole Parliament, and it should be supported and improved by the government, rather than, as we hear from newspaper reports, there's an actual risk of it being scrapped. That would be a very retrograde step, and particularly at this time when we've got the eyes of the world on us for the schemes that we're introducing to address some of the carbon emission challenges and targets that we've made.
Could I just remind Honourable and Right Honourable members that we must have short questions and short answers, because we've got 2 very well subscribed debates tomorrow, and we've only got 20 minutes put aside for this, which means we've got about 5 minutes left. Jerome Mayhew.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll do my best. The report of the committee highlights the evidence from the Bank of England that says we'll need a carbon tax of about $100 per tonne by 2030 for a smooth transition of the economy to net zero. If we want to prevent large-scale offshoring of our industry and to support the growth of low-carbon manufacturing here in the UK, we are going to need a scheme of carbon border adjustment. The EU and the USA, they're already looking and working at this policy, which is both a good and a bad thing. So does the Chair agree with me that our presidencies of both the G7 and COP26 are an unmissable opportunity to lead an international approach to carbon border adjustment, rather than risk the imposition of piecemeal protectionist carbon barriers by individual trading blocs, with the risk of us being on the outside?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right. There's no question that introducing such a scheme unilaterally would be potentially more damaging than if we can get international agreement. Our report recommended that the Treasury consider both of these issues of carbon pricing and a carbon border adjustment, and I very much hope they will take that recommendation forward.
Video link, Kerry McCarthy.
I congratulate the Honourable Member and his committee on this report, and I see that it calls for new road projects to be explicitly appraised against air quality, biodiversity and climate change commitments, which I very much welcome. Yet it's now been reported that the Transport Secretary overruled advice from his own civil servants on the need to conduct an environmental review of the planned expansion of England's road networks. Does the committee intend to follow up on its report by raising this with the Secretary of State? And does he see a future role for the committee in scrutinising the environmental impact of the road expansion policy if the Transport Secretary is unwilling to do so?
Philip Dunne.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for reading the report with sufficient her customary diligence to find that those references. She was a very valuable member of the committee for many years. I think we will have to wait as a committee to see the government response to our report. We will be looking for responses to all our recommendations, including in relation to transport, as she's highlighted, and we will then decide how to respond and how that will inform our further work. But her point is well made.
Video link, Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for this report that highlights the importance of maintaining our net zero target while focusing on our economic recovery. What steps does this report highlight in how to improve the shortcomings found within the Green Homes Grant?
Philip Dunne.
Thank you. Well, this is obviously this specific measure that the government introduced with a view to achieving both its objectives of stimulating the economy and of meeting net zero obligations and generating jobs. And at present, the scheme is disappointing in every respect. What it requires is a thorough overhaul of the administration of the scheme, working closely with the industry and contractors to improve the implementation of the scheme, and more certainty by extending its duration.
Video link, Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the committee's report's focus on the need to address our ecological crisis without delay, does he agree that we need a strategy to double nature and that this is best done by devolving resources and power to local authorities?
Philip Dunne.
The Honourable Lady is preempting our next inquiry into biodiversity and ecosystems. We will have a great deal to say on the way in which nature protection, conservation and focus at both a national and a local level in that report. And I look forward to her observations on that report in coming weeks and months.
Jacob Young.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as co-chair of the APPG on carbon capture and storage and chair of the APPG on hydrogen, and I thank my honourable friend for his committee's report and specifically recommendations 20 and 21. They mention the urgent need for a hydrogen strategy, and I completely agree. I'd be grateful if he could elaborate on what policies he would like to see in the hydrogen strategy.
Philip Dunne.
I applaud the groundbreaking work that my honourable friend is bringing to the House in relation to hydrogen through his leadership of the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which is doing great work in raising awareness and suggesting solutions. So I rather bow to his superior knowledge on this issue. I think the key thing for industry is to understand what the government's hydrogen strategy will look like. So getting it published and that will provide industry with a structure around which they can invest. There have been some encouraging signals in the 10-point Green Industrial Revolution plan, but at the moment these seem to be modest steps, and we need the full strategy to be published as soon as possible.
Video link, Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, and I thank the chair of our committee and agree with all that he said. Does he agree there's real urgency for the carbon intensity of the Bank of England's corporate bond portfolio to be cut and aligned with the Paris Agreement? Because given that analysis by the Bank of England itself shows the portfolio is in step with a catastrophic 3.5-degree temperature rise, this is clearly untenable, particularly if the UK aspires to be a credible host of COP26. He's spoken about the failure of the Green Homes Grant. Does he agree that a failure to establish a revised scheme on a multi-year basis would do enormous damages both to businesses and consumers by destroying confidence and trust in any future home retrofit projects. I've got businesses in my constituency that face going bust because of the incompetence of this scheme.
Philip Dunne.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her contribution to our committee and her characteristically robust portrayal of some of our recommendations. And with relation to the Bank of England, I touched on that in my remarks. As to the pace at which the bank seeks to adjust its portfolio, I think this is a matter for the bank, but they have agreed to look at the portfolio in the response from the governor, and I think that's a very good start. The bank has led the way internationally in many of its approaches towards climate change, and I think COP26 again provides the Bank of England with an opportunity to do more. And in relation to the Green Homes Grant Scheme, I completely agree with her that this must be turned into a multi-year scheme to provide confidence to installers up and down the country.
Number 8 withdrawn. So Shadow Minister Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On this side, we very much welcome this report with its sense of urgency and calls for action. Just wish the government would match that. Also agree with the comments on the Green Homes Grant. And delighted to see the committee recommend a National Nature Service pilot, which Labour have been calling for. We've also been calling for the government to bring forward £30 billion in planned capital investment as part of a rapid stimulus package to support up to 400,000 new clean jobs in manufacturing and other key sectors. So would the committee chair agree with me that that's the kind of scale of ambition that we're going to need if we're going to see nature at the centre of a green recovery?
Yeah. Philip Dunne.
Grateful to the his welcome that he's just given. I'm delighted to hear that the Labour front bench are keen on a National Nature Service. It was first recommended in a report that we did as a committee 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm glad that all parts of the House are catching up with our committee in their recommendations. In terms of the scale of the measures that are required, our committee didn't seek to quantify, but we absolutely recognise this is a multi-year, multi-billion pound effort required in order to achieve the net zero ambition. It will reach across all elements of society and the economy, and minor measures are not going to move the dial.
Sir John Redwood for the O-Link.
I strongly support the green VAT cuts. Did the committee examine the future of the petrol and diesel car industry, and especially the future of the diesel engine plants with all their skilled staff and their big assets, if the government moves to an early ban on these new vehicles?
Philip Dunne.
Grateful to my right honourable friend. The committee is taking an interest in the impact of a transition from the current economy with its carbon-intensive sectors to a net zero economy. We are looking at our future programme and some of the impacts of both green jobs, which we're in the middle of an inquiry on now, which we will be addressing specifically the point that he makes in terms of the impact on the motor sector, but also in the future we're interested in some of the impacts from moving from an internal combustion engine source of transport to electrified transport and what that might do across different transport sectors. We will be working with the Transport Committee to ensure that we don't duplicate efforts but are able to look into those matters.